401 Alpha, Roger.
Hello, my name is Holly Barkwell, and I'm the President and CEO of BH Group, Inc., and I'm also the NENA Canadian Region Director. We're here to talk about Next Generation 911 and the opportunities that it presents for public safety. With me today is Ryan Lawson, the Director of Public Safety Initiatives Operations for E-Comm. Thank you very much, Ryan, for joining us today. We much appreciate your time. I'd like to start off with a question that's on the minds of many people that are progressing through the next gen roadmap, I guess. And that is, what exactly does the term next generation mean to you and your organization?
Great question, and it's probably one that a lot of people are dealing with right now. And what it means to me personally and what it means to my organization are two separate things. To add a bit of comic relief here, to me it means 911 is joining the 21st century. But to my organization, and I think largely to most people across the country, it simply represents the evolution of emergency service access from a traditional phone call to the multitude of different access methods available through technology today, whether that be data-driven services like messaging or video or file transfer, telematics. Essentially, it is the evolution of the system to allow us to process things that we have never processed before.
And do you see that significantly changing the way that your operations staff works for dispatchers and call takers?
Absolutely, in a couple of different ways. Interesting that you mentioned both call takers and dispatchers, because largely the interface here will affect call takers. It will actually affect dispatchers as well. On the call taking end, we're not entirely sure that at the moment the job itself is going to be the same in the new world. We have to look at obviously the skill sets of our current staff, but also who we're starting to hire for the future now, with a little bit more emphasis perhaps on the ability to multitask, although a lot of people in our business can do that very well today. This will be a different kinds of skill. This will be a little bit more of the skills that you tend to see in people that work in big data or in programming type roles. Being able to process information from multiple different sources rather quickly. But it also will change what's available. If we now start seeing information, for example, like my best example is the way it will change dispatch is if there is now, for example, a picture of a motor vehicle accident and you can clearly see the hazardous materials placard on the side of a truck in a picture. That might be a prompt to go check, well, what's in that truck and what kind of hazardous material might be there that you might never have gleaned over a telephone call. So it's going to have impacts both for the call taking side and for the dispatch side.
Well, that's an excellent point. So in relation to that, what is the biggest challenge you and your agency face regarding operational readiness for next generation? And how are you addressing those challenges?
Well, there are certainly a lot of challenges, but if we want to talk about what the top ones are, I'm actually going to first say I think that the least of all the challenges is the technical part of this. It's pretty much the known quantity. Yes, there will be some challenges, I think, for agencies in terms of securing funding for equipment and things like that that will have to be worked through. In terms of operational readiness for this, I actually view most of the challenges as non-technical. First of all, there's the human factor challenges here. People being exposed to things they've never been exposed to before, or at least in the realm of our environment. There'll be different needs for training, different needs for recruiting, different needs for quality assurance. And also, I think different support mechanisms for the people. I think we're going to have to access probably a little bit more on the mental health side and the post-traumatic stress side. So there's a whole bunch of people aspects that are sort of challenge number one. And challenge number two is, I think, largely going to be related to all of the different types of ways that processing 911 sessions in the way that it is envisioned through the i3 architecture opens up a whole new world of issues around freedom of information, storage, custodianship, ownership of data. Where is the demarcation line between when it's the property of the person versus the property of the PSAP versus the property of the investigating agency? I think we are going to probably end up sifting through a fair amount of legal issues around what is considered evidence, what is not considered evidence, chain of custody. And then, of course, I think we've got to end up dealing with the public side of this. So there's the people, our people, then there's our sort of non-technical logistics that have to be worked through. And then I think there's a public expectation side that's going to be a challenge. Managing that, educating the public, and ensuring that everyone's on the same page about what you can and can't do through your 911 session.
Wow, those are some good points that you've brought up, and I'm sure there are dozens more. With regards to those challenges, what assistance or tools does your organization require to move forward towards next-gen readiness, if any?
I think no matter what size organization you are, you're going to need some assistance, especially from within our industry. And I think those challenges will be different depending, and what type of assistance agencies need will be different depending on their size and whether or not they're sort of a part of a police department or a part of a fire department versus my organization, which is a sort of standalone agency. So in some ways we have some advantage there in that we don't have to go, begging a police chief for funding or things like that. We've got a funding mechanism. But I think the types of assistance that we're going to need is the fellowship of our peers across the country, so that at least on the rollout side, this is a smooth, phased, structured rollout so that people have a common experience. One of the worst things I think that could possibly happen here is that somebody who travels frequently between, say, Vancouver and Toronto, may access, an NG911 type service in Vancouver, but what if Toronto's not there yet and they go to try and do the same thing and they have a different experience? So I think that's one of those things that really means that from an assistance standpoint, it's more like, the country needs to move together on this at roughly the same speed and roughly the same type of implementation timeline, so that the customer experience, in our case, the public experience, is similar coast to coast, or as best and close as we can. In terms of tools, I think that is absolutely, and I'm going to call it a tool, but things like the Emergency Services Working Group, other professional groups, APCO, NENA, I think every agency needs to have people at all of these tables in order to make sure that both from a technical and non-technical standpoint, everyone is on the same page. We've even seen, obviously, in the last few years, things as simple as terminology related to next generation 911 have been stumbling blocks because different things mean different things to other people. And even just starting at the very beginning, planting the seed with people, the change from a call to a session, that's going to be about the most fundamental sort of piece that we need to start hammering home. So assistance, I think we need to be a global community, and tools, I think we need to utilize the groups and mechanisms that are available to us to make sure we're all on the same page and all talking about the same thing. Largely, in terms of baseline tools like RFP production and things like that, my agency might be in a different spot than others, but I think for some of the smaller agencies, certainly tools that help them decide how to structure an RFP for the right kind of equipment, how to begin the change management process, and how to at least look at this from an overall project perspective. So some of the tools that ESWIG is producing, some of the great schematics and standards that NENA has worked through this entire process, I think are all tools that are going to be very helpful.
Well, that's great insight. Thank you very much for that. And just a couple more questions and we'll let you go. What advice, if you have any, would you give to other PSAPs that are either in the planning stages or just starting their journey?
First piece of advice, start now. One of the things that I think was a bit of an eye opener for some people that I've spoken to who weren't quite as knowledgeable about where we were at was some of the timelines that have been produced through CRTC telecom regulatory policy. And of course, that doesn't mean that people have to be ready to go by certain dates, but the one date that I think surprised most people was that 2023 date in which the cellular companies can start to sort of deconstruct their legacy architecture and all their legacy equipment. So, yes, we have some time and to phase in the implementation, but ultimately it's kind of got to all be done by about 2023. And when we look in timelines in our industry, 5 years is not a long time. And so start now and start small. The advice I would give is at the very least, use whatever tools, clout, whatever you can use to get your executive into a room and sit them down and help them understand what's coming. And the way sort of I've approached that is demystify it. Get away from the flowcharts and the network diagrams and simply talk about the reality of how the job is going to change. And as soon as you get that on sort of acceptance by very, very senior leaders in your organization, makes it a little bit easier to start down the road of preparing change management planning and starting to dedicate some resourcing. My organization was wonderful, and this year decided to designate a portion of a resource to this initiative at a senior level so that we could start the change management. I know that not everyone's in that position. However, this is a significant change. I've tried to explain to my staff that, in my opinion, that this is the biggest change to hit our industry since the invention of the telephone, and it will be. And we absolutely, you need to get started now. Start small if you have to, and then dive in. But the change management of this will be significant, and it's got to start soon.
Thank you for that. Those are some really illuminating points. And the last question I have for you, is there anything else you would like people to know going into this process?
Other than obviously, I think what's really important, and the thing that I would leave people as a parting thought, is a repeat of something I just said. This is the single biggest change to hit public safety communications since the invention of the telephone. And it's going to hit a lot of different change points that are probably not all front of mind. A lot of people are thinking about equipment. A lot of people are thinking about technology, call flow. It's going to hit every single portion of whatever organization you belong to that in any way supports the communication center. It's going to be HR, your corporate communications, your public outreach people. It's going to hit your technology people, your operations people, your executive, your leadership, your legal, your lawyers. Every single piece of the puzzle that somehow supports the Emergency Communication Center or the PSAP is going to be touched by this. So wrap your head around how much of this is change, and plan for it. We're not going to catch everything. Obviously, once 2020 and sort of 2023 go by, someone's going to go, oops, we never thought of that. Well, that happens with everything, but start now, start small, but start making lists. This is going to be a really significant change.
Okay. Well, that wraps us up for today. Thank you very much, Ryan, for participating in our project. And we look forward to continuing the conversation down the road.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.